Hello everyone, back at it again in my little yellow kayak. We're going to be doing something different today. We're going to be fishing Ned rigs for trout. I just launched the kayak. We're at a fairly clear trout pond. There's also some bass in here. What else? There's yellow perch. There's a lot of yellow perch. We've got a southeast wind. And we're in kind of a little backwater here. There's a lot more wind out in the main lake. So I'm just taking a few casts near the launch because sometimes the trout like to hang out near the boat ramps where they get stocked. But I really didn't do too much here. I had all my luck in the main lake. Sometimes, it seems like they're all over the lake. Sometimes they can be in one particular spot. Sometimes they can be on the windy side. On this trip, I found the most trout on a main lake point, where the wind was kind of blowing up the lake around the point, but they seem to be kind of stacked at the end of the point. It's not near any of the stocking points. They just seem to accumulate there, and I think it was because of the way the wind was hitting the point. Anyway, we'll get to that in a minute. So I started fishing Ned rigs for trout a few years ago, and if you look at the original writings from Ned, I'm not sure how to say his name, but it's either Ked or Keddy. He took very detailed notes and he described a lot of different retrieves for Ned rigs. Mostly for bass, people fish Ned rigs on the bottom. It's a slow retrieve, lots of pauses, some shaking. But Ned described swimming retrieves, straight retrieves, kind of a twitchy retrieve. He had a couple different retrieves that he talked about. And the one that seems to do the best for trout is something a little bit more active than what you would fish for bass. So generally, I'm swimming these Ned rigs. I'm not letting them sit on the bottom and shaking them. I'm swimming them. And the Ned rigs themselves, I've tried a few different ones. I've tried smaller pieces of the TRD, the finesse TRD, just the original kind of Ned rig 3-inch shape. And I just cut it down a little bit. And I put a jig head with a number 1 hook on it. So a little smaller than the normal hook. I've also tried the new micro TRD. I didn't do as well on that. I don't really know why. The bigger ones seem to do better. I've also fished the lower part of a hula sticks. So a lot of times I'll fish that on the hula sticks on a weedless Ned head, and then I kind of wear it out after hooking a lot of fish, and I'll cut it back to where the bait is worn out, and it ends up being about half of the hula sticks onto that same jig head with a number 1 hook. And the cut down hula sticks works great too. For colors, I tend to go pretty natural, some kind of green pumpkin, watermelon variant. They have a color called California Craw that has some red and gold flake in it. I like that color. But I've also done well on just plain green pumpkin. And I put some kind of scent on there. It could be the Procure crawfish scent, or Berkeley has a trout scent that works pretty well too. But some kind of scent. And that seems to help the trout bite it and eat it. Because they have, in general, fairly small mouths. Smaller than, say, a largemouth bass. So that's why I'm using a smaller hook. And then for line, usually 4 or 6 pound test. I find I can go a little bit heavier than with some of my finesse plastics that I use for trout. And I think they just kind of focus on the size of the bait, and it looks like an easy meal, and they eat it. So I'm just working my way along this shoreline here, but we're going to head out into the main lake in just a minute. All right, we're out on the main lake now. I'm fishing a long tapering point which extends out underneath the water, and I've been kind of progressively working out along the point until I'm at the drop off at the end of the point. And I'm fishing with a light powered think that's an old St. Croix Legend Tournament rod. Basically a light rod that you would use for Ned rigs, but maybe one power lighter. So if you use a medium light for bass, maybe go with a light. And I'm swimming that bait along the bottom. I'm pretty close to the bottom. I can feel myself hitting the bottom every once in a while. And there's a trout that keeps missing the Ned rig. He's not getting the hook. He's pulling on the tail. And I'm just going to keep working him until he actually takes the bait, and I'll reel down tight and stick him. So that happens from time to time. They have smaller mouths than bass, and sometimes it takes me a few tries before they actually get it. The wind definitely helps this kind of a bite, and if it was dead flat calm, I usually don't start with a Ned rig. I'll start with something smaller and natural, a lighter line probably. But I got my first fish. That's a little brown. And off he goes. The wind is kind of giving me a hard time on this trip. I need the wind to get the fish to eat the Ned rig better. Without the wind, they don't eat it as well. But every time I catch a fish, the wind blows me way out of position. I have to backpedal my way back onto the end of the point. And what I really need is my anchor. And I left my anchor at home. So I'm just trying to make the most of it and deal with the wind as best I can. But kind of the goal here is to get that bait off the end of the point and work my way back up the point, kind of uphill, up along the point. And I'm kind of shaking it, but reeling it in fairly steadily. I'm not letting it sit on the bottom like I would for smallmouth or largemouth or something like that. And they usually hit it while it's moving. Whereas a lot of times largemouth might pick it up off the bottom when it was dead still, or smallmouth. And that's a rainbow trout. Yeah, it works for, I've caught brook trout on these, rainbows, brown trout. I think I only caught rainbows and brown trout on this trip. But they're all fun. Just like fishing other soft plastics for trout, they only have one hook in them. They release pretty well. You can pick through them and decide if you want to keep one or let them go. Yeah, nice little rainbow. They all swim off nicely. It's a little chilly today, so I'm using that towel to dry off my hands. That towel helps a lot, keeping my hands dry, and then I can put my gloves back on. It's almost May. I'm still in fleece gloves because we've had this cold front come through, and in the morning it was below freezing, and this is the afternoon, and it's really not all that warm out here with the wind and everything. All right, now I gotta set up on the point again. Kind of got blown off. But I caught a couple trout, and I decided I'd see if I could find another group of trout someplace where I wouldn't have to fight the wind so much. And it was a good plan. It just didn't work out. And I ended up coming right back to the point after poking around in some other spots for a little bit. Sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't, and you don't know unless you try it. And I figured I could come back to this point and catch more trout later if I needed to, which is what happened. All right, I'm back to the point. Same plan. I'm going to drop that Ned rig off the end of the point into some deeper water, reel up the slack, and start swimming it back. I was mixing up my retrieve, seeing what worked best. Do kind of these start and stop retrieves, but mostly swimming it. Sometimes I try to swim it low and slow, sometimes a little faster. Generally, I try to fish as fast as I can and still get bit. And the fish will let you know if you're doing it wrong. Once you have the right bait on, the fish will let you know, that's too fast, that's just right, or a little slower. And I could tell if I got too close to the bottom, I would get a lot of perch nipping at the bait. And sometimes a trout would get in between the perch and take that Ned rig out of the school of perch, which I thought was kind of cool. But for the most part, the trout were up higher than the perch. That's a rainbow. Off he goes. When I was launching, I ran into a gentleman who had just got a new saltwater boat. Well, it was new to him. And he wanted to take it out onto the trout lake and make sure the old gas was still good. And it had a bunch of electronics on it. He wanted to test the electronics out, make sure everything worked. And he made multiple passes around the whole lake, side scanning everything. And he told me that all the fish were near the boat ramp where I launched. And I thought I'd try there. You know, that makes a lot of sense to try there first. And I couldn't get those fish to bite. It might have been a lack of wind, something about my presentation, maybe something I was doing wrong. But when I found these fish that were in the wind off this point and more willing to eat, I just dropped that fish. That's all right, I'll get another one. I was really happy to find this small pot of fish. And so I believe what that guy was telling me is that the majority of fish are near the boat ramp. But I couldn't catch them. And so for me, I'd rather fish a smaller pod of active fish that are willing to eat instead of a large school of fish that I can't get to bite and just, bang my head against the wall for a couple hours. That's no fun. I'd rather be out here fishing the active fish and having a little bit more success. And it seems like wind is a big factor with that, but it also applies to other species, not just trout. If I can find a group of bass that are on the wind-blown side of a lake and they're willing to eat, it's a lot faster fishing for me and easier as long as I can position in the wind to catch those fish on the wind-blown side instead of trying to fish in the lee and working harder for every bite. I just thought it was interesting, something to think about next time you're on the water. All right, just made another cast and out into deeper water. I'm going to let that bait sink a little bit. Do a little back pedal. Try to keep myself in position on the point. Doesn't look that windy on camera. When I was out there, it actually felt a little bit windier than it looks. I just missed a fish there. I'm fishing a little bit slower now, mixing up my retrieve. And this is a little bit slower. I'm trying to fish that bait near the bottom. And I got him. Loosening up the drag a little bit. That's a Daiwa Legalis 1000. It's the blue reel. I think they're coming out with a new model. But you don't need really specific gear for this kind of fishing. Just a little bit heavier trout gear. If you don't have trout gear, a little bit lighter bass spinning gear, and you'll be in good shape. If he'd sit still, I'd show him to you. There he is. Nice rainbow. Off he goes. The wind kind of blew me off the point again. So I'm going to make a cast out into deeper water. And I'm going to backpedal. Now, if there was a bunch of other boats out here, I wouldn't do this because I'm going to be leaving a lot of line on the surface of the water, and you don't want somebody running over all that line with a motor. But there's nobody else out here. The guy with the saltwater boat left an hour ago, and I've got the whole lake to myself, so it's no problem fishing like this. Once I'm on the point, if I look over the side of the boat, I can see the bottom, and that's how I know I'm on the end of the point. And I just try to keep the boat where I can barely see the bottom, and that means I'm towards the tip of the point and not off of it. That's how I fish a lot of the time in trout water, is I set up on the color line Some people call it the color line. It's where the water drops off into deeper water. So basically where I can't see the bottom, that's usually where I want to set up the boat and fish along that color line, either along the color line or out into deeper water, like I'm doing here. I'm fishing deeper water here. You can see the lighter water underneath me. That's the bottom. And that's another rainbow. He's doing his best impression of an alligator death roll, tangling up my Ned rig and him in the net. But we will get that sorted out. You know, if this was with, I don't know, like a repeller or something like that with 2 sets of treble hooks, that would make a giant mess in the net. With the Ned rig and a single hook, it's really no problem to get that bait out again, and I'm fishing in no time. Alright, same thing. I'm going to cast off the end of the point. I'm not too far out of position right now. I just need to do a couple backstrokes with the paddle there. Get back onto the end of the point. Make sure my reel's okay. Reel up the slack, and I'm going to start a swimming retrieve with the Ned rig. Not sure what the fish think it is. Maybe a crawfish or some kind of aquatic insect. But whatever they think it is, they like it. I do have crawfish scent on it, so maybe that's what they think it is. Some of these fish were a little bit longer and skinny. They could be holdovers. Looks like I lost a clip there, but I did end up landing that fish. Okay, I think I got one more trout here for you. Same thing, casting it out into deeper water, reeling up my slack. Let it sink down just a little bit, and then I'm going to start my swimming retrieve. I'm mixing it up here a little bit. I think I threw in some shakes here. Yeah, right like that. Just trying different things, seeing if I could find a swimming retrieve that triggers the trout like that. And I got another one. You can target stock trout a lot of different ways, but I like fishing this way. It's a lot of fun, you know, with the rod in your hand and mixing up the retrieves and seeing what it takes to fool them. It's different than trolling or fishing power bait from shore, or I don't know, fishing blown up crawlers or something like that. Nice rainbow. Off he goes. And it's just one of the ways that I like to fish for them when the conditions line up. The other thing that's nice about fishing Ned rigs for trout is that every once in a while I run across a smallmouth, and if you flip them a Ned rig that has crawfish scent all over it, like that little morsel right there, 9 out of 10 times they don't even hesitate, they just eat it. So it's a very versatile approach. It's good for bass and trout. And if you fish it really slow, you want to catch perch, you can catch the heck out of some big perch with a shortened down Ned rig. But I had a great time out here this afternoon catching trout on Ned rigs. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it. I'll list all the gear in the video description, and I'll catch you on the next one. See ya!